Now, we may not give a lot of screen time to subwoofers on this channel, but they are a necessary part of any hi-fi or home theater system, at least the ones interested in recreating full range sound. Now, I love subwoofers and have owned more than a few over the years, ranging from the truly insane to the positively budget. But my favorite subwoofers have all had one trait in common, and that is size. Just maybe not the size you're thinking of. Which is why I was so excited to review today's product, the 3000 micro subwoofer from SVS. So subscribe and hit that like button, and let's find out if size really matters. The 3000 Micro is the newest subwoofer from SVS Sound. As its name suggests, it's a compact subwoofer that promises big performance. The 3000 features dual opposing 8-inch active drivers powered by a Class D 800-watt amplifier. Now, the internal sledge amp has a peak power rating of 2500 watts, which is somewhat crazy for a subwoofer of this size and budget. The sub's driver complement and power give it a reported frequency response of 23 Hz to 240 Hz. Around back, you'll find a pair of line-level RCA inputs as well as a pair of outputs, also RCA. There's also an input for the SVS wireless audio adapter and some push-button controls for volume, phase, and crossover point. Most subwoofers have knobs or dials located on the back, or in some cases up top, for control over the subwoofer's volume, phase, and crossover, but the SVS uses buttons, partially because the 3000 is meant to be controlled via its app. Yes, the 3000 Micro has a control app. This is not the first subwoofer to feature app-based control. Other manufacturers, such as ELAC and Martin Logan, as well as SVS, have been offering this feature for a while. But remote access of a subwoofer's higher functionality really is the future and makes setup and configuration a relative breeze compared to doing it, well, the old-fashioned way. And I think the SVS app is brilliant, not to mention very easy to set up and intuitive to use, minus one caveat, which I'll get to in just a moment. You not only have control over basic subwoofer functions like volume, phase, and crossover, you also have the ability to do more advanced tuning through the use of DSP in the form of PEQ, which is very handy if you want to take your subwoofer's performance from good to great in your environment. PEQ, or parametric equalization, is more involved than, say, a traditional graphic EQ or tone control, and often requires measurement tools and or software to implement it correctly. If you know what you're doing, it is a very, very powerful tool, and the fact that this capability is included inside the 3000 Micro cannot be overstated. Those of you with two-channel systems now get to benefit from DSP, or digital signal processing, typically reserved for those with expensive AV receivers or dedicated processors. And while you can tune the subwoofer by ear and create filters that way, I use the free software Room EQ Wizard to not only measure the subwoofer's performance in my space, but also to create a series of filters to better tailor it to my room for tighter, more accurate bass. Now, I have already made a video on how to use Room EQ Wizard with any subwoofer, which I'll link to down below. Just know that the video is pretty old and pretty basic, so please be kind. If you want to see an updated video showing you how to use Room EQ Wizard in 2021, go ahead and leave me a comment down below. The app also allows you the ability to save different settings as presets, which SVS labels movie, music, and custom. Here's where I have a problem with the app. I don't mind that there are only 3 adjustable or modifiable presets. I doubt anyone would need any more than that, but setting them up isn't wholly intuitive. For example, for every adjustment you make within the various sub-menus, you have to remember to save and assign it to a preset before exiting or moving on to another menu. Failure to do this will result in that setting not being saved or even being the default upon your return. This doesn't make the app bad, but it does make it just a little frustrating at times. Though once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. So this isn't a warning, this is just more of a heads up. Now, if you're wondering why you would want a smaller subwoofer like the 3000 Micro over, say, a larger one, the answer is twofold. First, the most obvious reason being space concerns. Not everyone has the physical space for a larger subwoofer like the SVS SB16 Ultra, or even the more affordable but still kind of big SB1000 Pro. But the not so obvious reason as to why you may want a smaller sub over a larger one is so that you can have multiple subs. More subs doesn't always equal more bass or more volume, but multiple subwoofers can and often make for smoother, more even bass over a wider area. If you don't have the real estate for a big subwoofer, chances are you can accommodate 2 or 3 or even 4 of them. But You may be able to if they were smaller. But enough with the education, Andrew. How does the 3000 micro sound? Surprisingly big. I love compact subwoofers. I prefer them over 12, 14, and even 16-inch variants because I like my bass tight and agile, and I'm willing to sacrifice some ultimate low-end extension for speed if necessary. The 3000 micro is one of the few subwoofers I've encountered that really isn't asking me to make that choice. It's the only subwoofer that I can think of that manages both at this price. Let's just deal with the obvious. The micro is not as authoritative down to 20 Hz and beyond, though it gets close enough that I think many will likely never notice. The only situations where I could see the micro not being able to hold its own or otherwise fool one into thinking it was way bigger would be those that just insist upon hearing notes below, say, 30 Hz, nearing or even surpassing 100 decibels for prolonged periods of time. You know who you are. But in everyday viewing or listening, whereby you're relying on your subwoofer to augment your system's bottom end and not completely rearrange your bowels, the micro is going to surprise you. Its reach is solid, well down into the mid-20s, though it's obviously strongest at about 30 Hz and up. Within that range, the bass is taut, it's firm, and lightning quick, provided you've placed it in your room properly and set it up correctly. If you need help with placement, we've got a video for that, and you know where you can find it down in the description along with everything else. Music or movies, the micro was an ideal partner for every speaker we paired with it, be it the JBL L82, the Q Acoustic Concept 300, or even the ungodly expensive Focal Diablo Utopia Evos. And for those of you that want to give me a hard time, it is pronounced Focal. I even called France. And the micro blended seamlessly, and its presence in my setup always produced noticeable and positive changes. Instruments such as drum kits took on added weight, dimension, and scale. The presence of this added dimension always resulted in the performance feeling more grounded and real as a result. But more importantly, at least for me, the micro was always able to keep pace with what was happening upstream. And it was the same for movies, though I wasn't quite prepared for just how much air the micro was able to ultimately move. Part of experiencing bass rather than just hearing it has to do with that concussive wave of air that often accompanies low frequencies. While the micro doesn't move air the way a JL Audio Gotham subwoofer can, the fact that I was still able to really feel a sense of environmental shift from a sub as small as the micro was impressive. Still, I much preferred the micro's focus on detail in speed and all but the lowest notes, where with movies, it could get just a little flat. When watching the film Battleship, the final showdown between the aliens and the Navy, there were one or two instances where listening at high volumes where I was able to get the micro to bottom out. The good news is, when the micro does decide to throw in the towel, it's just not a sore loser. It just sort of gently bows out. So rather than be taken out of the film by hearing a loud, ugly thwack or some sort of ugly cabinet resonance, the bass just sort of backs off and becomes a bit, one note. Honestly, it was only when I was trying to break the micro's back did I hear anything that I couldn't otherwise classify as solid, if not great, performance. In terms of drawbacks, I don't have many, for I think the 3000 micro is a terrific compact subwoofer and a rather insane value, all things considered. It obviously isn't going to play down to 20 Hz or lower with the same authority of more powerful or larger subs, and if you need to fill a truly large space with bass, you either need to budget for multiple micros or just look elsewhere. Aside from that, it's just really good. In terms of comparisons, the one I know you want me to weigh in on is how the 3000 micro compares to the new KEF KC62, and I just don't know. On paper, what I can tell you is these two appear to be twinsies, so you're absolutely justified in wanting to know if spending more for the KEF gets you more. I would love to answer that question. I just haven't heard the KEF yet, so you're just gonna have to stay tuned. But my gut tells me that the KEF is likely pretty special, but knowing what I know about subs, I'd probably err on the side of caution this time and get two 3000 micros for the price of one KEF, if for no other reason than to benefit from the added flexibility and wider coverage. Another small sub that I recently played with that may be cross-shopped against the SVS is the REL T0 Mark III. Now the REL is a beautiful subwoofer and a great option for adding a bit more bass to, say, a pair of smaller bookshelf speakers, but it really doesn't compete with the SVS here. I would even hesitate to use the word subwoofer when describing the T0, as it's more akin to adding a powered bass driver or woofer to your two-way monitor than it is adding a subwoofer. woofer. It just doesn't really have the legs to run alongside the SVS. Another comparable sub in terms of size, performance, and app functionality would have to be the Martin Logan Dynamo 1100. The Dynamo is a little bit bigger, it has a 12-inch woofer, and it is more expensive, but it's still comparable. Though I would argue its size and higher price just further cements the Micro's value proposition. But if you're tight on cash, and who isn't, but you still want some bass in your life, the Klipsch R120SW and Polk HTS10 are worth a look. So in the end, what SVS has managed to create in the 3000 Micro is rather surprising. The fact that they've done it for so little money is astonishing. The sheer level of control mixed with the raw performance makes the Micro not only a great option for those looking to add bass to their system while staying on a budget, but its size makes it a potentially better choice for those looking to implement multiple subwoofers in their system for even more and smoother bass response. But whatever your end goal, short of needing to crack your home's foundation, the SVS 3000 Micro subwoofer it's definitely worth a look. So that's it. That is my review of the SVS 3000 Micro subwoofer. Now, what did Kristi think?
I like it. I think it's really good. I like the size of it, especially the design is really nice. It's simple. They're not trying to do too much with it. It's not too flashy. It's not too plain. It's surprisingly upscale. I don't want to say surprisingly upscale because for SVS, because the SB16 Ultra, which is their flagship, that's a beautiful sub, and that in the looks and performance department can run against, some of the best like the JL Gotham and stuff. But for such a budget oriented subwoofer, I think that the 3000 Micro is, there's like the SB16, and then there's this one, and then there's all the other ones that they make in terms of visual style. Yeah, I thought it worked really well with all the speakers that we paired it with. Even these crazy expensive Focal speakers that are right behind you, they already have quite a bit of bass inherent to their sound.
Yeah.
But adding that, even though it's basically like getting something for free when you're talking about the price of these speakers.
Yeah.
It measured up. It wasn't like it didn't feel out of place, in other words.
No, not at all.
And as far as where it really surprised me was when we paired it with the Heresy Mark IVs. I know if you watched our KLH Model 5 review, you know that I said that the Heresies, from my perspective, were the easiest speaker to eliminate when we were talking about
what speakers to keep.
What do we keep? Because we don't have room to keep everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, the subwoofer really made me give a second look at the Heresies, and I was like, well, that changes things a little, and it really made a big difference and made me find a new appreciation for the Heresies.
Yeah, and one has to keep in mind that a pair of Heresies now with, say, the 3000 Micro, you're coming in less than a pair of Fortes. And you now have a little bit more flexibility with that bass, because in the Forte review we talked about needing to pull them out quite a bit, otherwise the bass could become rather fat and unruly. Well, the SVS Micro with Heresies doesn't have that problem, because you could put the bass where it sounds best and leave the Heresies where they sound best, and you're still coming in under, I don't want to know, I'm not going to say under budget because I don't know what your budget is, but you're coming in less than Forte 4s. And that's kind of a big deal. And I'm with you. When this was paired with the Heresies, I was like, I love the Forte 4s. They still have that broadness in the mid-range that the Heresies don't quite have. So the Forte 4s do get closer to that ideal of the La Scalas, but minus a 5 or 10% decrease in that mid-range scale, there's nothing to it. There really isn't anything to it.
The only thing I wish that SVS would do with this particular subwoofer would be to offer it in something more like a walnut finish, something a little bit more decor friendly. I know it comes in black
or white.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even mind if they were to give you that option to pay more for the privilege.
Yeah.
I think that would make it even more of a, no-brainer purchase. You know what I'm saying? I thought it provided a really big sound.
Yeah.
And for some of these, blockbuster type movies like the Godzilla vs. Kong, and I know you referenced the Battleship movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's positively huge sounding, and
Yeah.
it definitely gives you more of a closer to feeling like you're in like a movie theater.
Absolutely. That bottom octave, the importance, especially with home theater, the bottom octave cannot be overstated.
And again, I'll go back to the size factor. Not that I want to get into a wife acceptance factor discussion,
Mm-hmm.
but I do believe that if you're somebody out there and you're struggling with getting your significant other to be on board with this hobby, first of all, now I said I wasn't going to get into a discussion, but first of all, have a conversation.
Right.
That's going to get you further.
A legit one.
A legit one.
Yeah. A legit one that's like, hey.
Just like you would probably want to be involved in a discussion if it was something that maybe wasn't your personal,
Yeah.
interest. But yeah, having a discussion, I think, is the first place to start. But I think something like this would be a great way to kind of ease in and
Yeah.
introduce adding something like this into a system.
Absolutely.
That's going to be easier to
Digest.
not even digest, but just to live with and find a place for it to live in your home. Okay, so that's it for me as far as like my personal feelings about the subwoofer. But I do have a question for you, because I think during the review you touched upon it, but I personally don't feel like I got enough about the topic, so I'd like you to go over if somebody isn't going to invest the time to perform the the Room EQ.
Oh, the Room EQ Wizard software.
And they want to just set this up with whatever you can do without
gear.
Yeah, like
Okay.
So talk to me about that process and the experience you had with the subwoofer pre
Room EQ Wizard. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry if that wasn't clear. So basically, with any subwoofer, and if you watch our subwoofer setup video, we show the back of, I think it was an SVS SB1000, where it had knobs for volume, phase, crossover point, and stuff like that. And if you don't have an AV receiver, you would make all of these adjustments on the back of the sub. And you can still do that on the 3000 micro. There are buttons that allow you to do that, but you're really better off doing it with your phone in the app. And within the phone and in the app, with no special tools required, you can adjust the subwoofer's volume on the fly, and it's right there on the home screen. And that's actually really, really cool, because, sometimes subs or the bass line in a movie is mixed a little bit hotter. Like, for example, Kong versus Godzilla. Like, the sub response on that movie was just higher than Battleship. And so I went from Battleship to Kong, and I was like, oh, that's too much. So just being able to like pull out your phone and just, with the slider is really, really helpful. Dialing in phase and things like that, rather than having to lean over the back of a subwoofer and kind of dial it in, you can literally kind of sit between your nearest speaker and the sub and play with that phase until the bass centers like a stereo image between the speaker and the subwoofer, if you don't have tools telling you the phase of the subwoofer. And that's just really handy, not to mention better on your back, your shoulders, and whatnot. A lot of times when I used to set up subwoofers the old-fashioned way, I would do it with a friend, so that they could be the ones manipulating the knobs, and I could be like at my listening chair and going, okay, a little bit more, a little bit this, a little bit that. And this kind of takes that, it's kind of like having a friend, enables in setting up a subwoofer properly. Now, as far as like parametric EQ and DSP type filters, you can do those. You can do those manually or by ear. You're probably not going to be as exact with it unless you have just a lot of experience with subwoofers and listening to bass. If you have bass tracks or you have bass tests discs or files where you know, like if I hit play on this, it's going to play a 40 hertz signal. It's going to play a 50 hertz signal. Then I suppose, yes, by ear, you could start to create some DSP filters very easily inside the app. But if you are familiar with Room EQ Wizard, you can literally take one set of measurements, go into the EQ option at the top of the screen, and literally watch it, you know, even out your subwoofer's response, and then literally just take those numbers and punch them into the app and then hit save. Always hit save. First time I did it, I punched them into the app, and then I was just like, cool. And then I bailed out of the app, and then I was like, oh, I'm hearing something. I thought I fixed that. And then I go into the app and I realized all the parametric EQ filters are still set to 0. So, but yeah, the app is just really helpful for allowing you to set up the subwoofer kind of solo with a little bit more flexibility and freedom. And if you go on YouTube or I used to know a place, if you go on YouTube and you type in like subwoofer frequency sweep or something and you hit play, you're going to find files where it's like it'll play a 20 hertz signal, it will play a 30 hertz signal, and you can really kind of start to hear like, you know, what the subwoofer does in those ranges. And then I guess by ear, which is not an exact instrument, start to play with, you know, raising or lowering the subwoofer's volume, if you will, at those particular frequencies until you feel like it's more or less flat. But Room EQ Wizard just kind of takes the guesswork out of it, but you do have to know what you're doing. Is that better? A little bit more clear?
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud. Okay, that's fair. I mean, the number one thing to get right when dealing with subwoofers is their placement. Placement is everything, because you can put a subwoofer in one spot in your house, or you can go by the pictures you see online or in brochures, and you know, they'll sit there and say, put the sub next to your couch, or put the sub in a corner. Put the sub in the corner for more bass. That is sometimes true, or more often than not true, but that may not be the best place for a sub. So the number one thing to get right is put the sub in your room in the right place first. Get that right. You're already 70% of the way there. And then honestly, if you don't know anything more than that, going into your AV receiver or just dialing it in by ear, you shouldn't ever hear a subwoofer. Okay, I want to make that perfectly clear. When people are like, oh, it doesn't have the bass response, it does. You should not be aware of a subwoofer's presence. You shouldn't suddenly have, here's my speaker sound, and then there's the sub. It shouldn't ever be like that. It should be, my speaker just seems to keep going in terms of down into the basement. So if you have a tiny little bookshelf speaker like this, suddenly when you add a sub, it shouldn't sound like a tiny little bookshelf speaker like this and then a subwoofer over here. It should just be like this. So if you're ever able to go, oh, subwoofer's there, or oh, I hear a subwoofer, you have it set up wrong. Maybe that's not a popular opinion, but that's the truth. You should not be able to locate a subwoofer in your system, either by volume or placement. So if you have a system set up like that, where you can't really tell where the subwoofer is, and you can't really tell where your speaker stops and the subwoofer begins, you're doing things right. But if you have a system where you're like, oh man, all I hear is subs all day, I'm going to argue your system's set up wrong, because we're going for balance top to bottom, not just bass. So that's it. That is our review of the SVS 3000 micro subwoofer. What did you guys think? Let us know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, my question of the day for you is this: what would you rather have? One big subwoofer or multiple smaller subs? Let us know down in the comments below. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Kristi left for you down below, know that that is a great way that you guys have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here, and we both thank you very much. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for me today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you again for watching, and we will see you on the next video.